The year is 1922. From the ashes of the Russian Empire, a new power emerges. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR, is born. This vast nation stretches across Europe and Asia, a socialist experiment on an unprecedented scale. Imagine a sixth of the Earth's landmass, united under the red banner of communism. The Soviet Union's birth is no peaceful affair. It rises from the chaos of revolution, a bloody struggle that topples centuries of czarist rule. The Bolsheviks, led by the enigmatic Vladimir Lenin, seize power in 1917. Their promise? A world without poverty, a world without oppression, a world run by the workers. The early years are a time of both hope and hardship. The Soviet people face famine, civil war, and foreign intervention, but they also embrace the promise of a new society, one built on equality and social justice. The world watches with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Can this bold experiment succeed? Will the Soviet Union become a beacon of hope for the oppressed masses? Only time will tell. Vladimir Lenin, the architect of the Bolshevik Revolution, is a complex and controversial figure. A brilliant strategist and a ruthless revolutionary, he leads the Soviet Union through its tumultuous early years. His goal? To build a socialist utopia, a workers' paradise. Lenin's vision is ambitious. He nationalizes industry, collectivizes agriculture, and implements a centrally planned economy. His aim is to create a classless society where everyone shares in the fruits of their labor. But the road to utopia is paved with good intentions and unforeseen consequences. The transition is brutal. Millions die from famine and political violence as the old order crumbles and a new one takes its place. Lenin himself doesn't live to see his vision fully realized. In 1924, he succumbs to illness, leaving behind a power vacuum and a legacy that will be fiercely debated for generations to come. Following Lenin's death, a new figure emerges from the shadows, Joseph Stalin. A cunning politician and a ruthless dictator, Stalin consolidates his power through fear and intimidation. His reign will mark one of the darkest chapters in human history. Stalin's rule is defined by paranoia and brutality. He launches the Great Purge, a campaign of terror that eliminates anyone perceived as a threat, real or imagined. Millions are executed or sent to labor camps, victims of Stalin's insatiable thirst for power. Under Stalin's iron fist, the Soviet Union undergoes a period of rapid industrialization and collectivization. The economy grows, but at a terrible human cost. Forced labor becomes commonplace, and dissent is ruthlessly suppressed. Stalin's legacy is one of tyranny and oppression, a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power. As the dust settles after World War II, a new conflict emerges, the Cold War. The Soviet Union and the United States, former allies against Nazi Germany, become locked in an ideological struggle for global dominance. It's a clash of titans, communism versus capitalism, with the fate of the world hanging in the balance. The Cold War isn't a shooting war, not in the traditional sense. It's a war of ideas, of espionage, of proxy conflicts fought in far-flung corners of the globe. From Vietnam to Afghanistan, the two superpowers support opposing sides, fueling conflicts that claim countless lives. The world watches nervously as the two superpowers engage in a perilous arms race. Nuclear weapons proliferate, casting a long shadow over humanity. The threat of annihilation hangs heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the stakes involved. In this high-stakes game of chess, one wrong move could spell disaster for everyone. Section 5. Khrushchev's Thaw, a Glimmer of Hope. After Stalin's death in 1953, Nikita Khrushchev emerges as the new leader of the Soviet Union. Though a product of the Stalinist system, Khrushchev denounces his predecessor's crimes and initiates a period of de-Stalinization. It's a time of cautious optimism, a brief thaw in the Cold War freeze. Khrushchev attempts to reform the Soviet system from within. He introduces some limited freedoms, allowing for greater artistic expression and a degree of openness in Soviet society. He also pursues a policy of peaceful coexistence with the West, hoping to reduce tensions and avert nuclear war. However, Khrushchev's reforms are often inconsistent and met with resistance from hardliners within the Communist Party. His handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, though ultimately avoiding nuclear war, is seen by some as reckless and damages his reputation. In 1964, Khrushchev is ousted from power, his reforms cut short. Section 6. Stagnation and Reform. Brezhnev to Gorbachev. Following Khrushchev's removal, Leonid Brezhnev takes the helm of the Soviet Union. Under his leadership, the country enters a period of stagnation. The economy stagnates, innovation falters, and the Soviet people become disillusioned with the communist system. The cracks in the facade are starting to show. Despite the stagnation, Brezhnev presides over a period of relative stability. He strengthens the Soviet military, expands the country's influence in Eastern Europe, and engages in arms control talks with the United States. However, the cost of maintaining this superpower status takes its toll on the Soviet economy. By the early 1980s, the Soviet Union is in dire straits. The economy is on the brink of collapse, and social problems are mounting. In 1985, a relatively unknown reformer named Mikhail Gorbachev rises to power, determined to revitalize the Soviet Union and salvage the dream of a socialist utopia. His reforms, however, will have unintended consequences, ultimately leading to the collapse of the very system he is trying to save. Section 7. Cracks in the facade, internal and external pressures. By the late 1980s, the Soviet Union is facing a multitude of challenges, both internal and external. Economically, the country is lagging far behind the West. Decades of central planning have stifled innovation and created widespread shortages of consumer goods. The Soviet people are tired of standing in line for basic necessities. Politically, the Soviet system is becoming increasingly brittle. Gorbachev's policies of glasnost or openness and perestroika or restructuring are intended to revitalize the system, but they also unleash forces that he can't control. Nationalist movements long suppressed under Soviet rule begin to resurface, demanding greater autonomy and even independence. Externally, the Soviet Union is feeling the pressure of the ongoing Cold War. The arms race with the United States has placed an unsustainable burden on the Soviet economy. Meanwhile, the United States under President Ronald Reagan is taking a hard line against the Soviet Union, supporting anti-communist movements around the world and challenging Soviet influence in Eastern Europe. Section 8. The Collapse. A superpower crumbles. In 1989, the seemingly unshakable edifice of the Soviet Union begins to crumble. Inspired by Gorbachev's reforms and emboldened by the weakening grip of the Communist Party, one by one, the Soviet republics declare their independence. The once mighty empire is breaking apart. On December 25, 1991, the Soviet flag is lowered over the Kremlin for the last time. The Soviet Union is officially dissolved, marking the end of an era. The Cold War is over, and the world is left to grapple with the legacy of this colossal geopolitical experiment. The collapse of the Soviet Union is a momentous event, sending shockwaves across the globe. For some, it's a victory for freedom and democracy. For others, it's a tragedy, the death of a dream of a more just and equitable world. The legacy of the Soviet Union is complex and contested, a mix of remarkable achievements and horrific crimes. Section 9. A world transformed, the legacy of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union's legacy is a mixed bag. On the one hand, the Soviet Union made significant strides in education, healthcare, and social welfare. It also played a crucial role in defeating Nazi Germany during World War II, a sacrifice that should never be forgotten. On the other hand, the Soviet Union's history is marred by political repression, economic mismanagement, and human rights abuses. The shadow of Stalin's terror still looms large, and the ecological disasters caused by Soviet industrial policies continue to haunt the region. The collapse of the Soviet Union had a profound impact on the world. It marked the end of the Cold War, reshaped the global balance of power, and ushered in an era of globalization and uncertainty. The former Soviet republics faced a challenging transition to democracy and market economies, with varying degrees of success. Today, the legacy of the Soviet Union continues to be debated and re-examined. As we grapple with the challenges of the 21st century, it's essential to remember the lessons of the past, both the triumphs and the tragedies, as we strive to build a more just and peaceful world.